Mr. Baker has earned a PhD in sociology and social psychology from the University of Utah. He's retired from the aerospace and business management career. So for now, for our very first ever, the Sequoia Genealogical Society program via Zoom, Mr. Baker, James Baker.
Thank you. We'll just jump right in. Thank you for that fine introduction. And you know that tonight we're going to talk about Google, but in a different way than perhaps you have ever talked about it before, because this time we're going to talk about what it has to do with genealogy. Now, where we're coming from with Google is that whenever a question comes up, and it can be anything, we just sort of say, Google is going to know. And so we'll Google it. If we want to know how to plug in a battery in our car, if we want to fix a stain on the carpet, you know, whatever we want, Google, we figure, is going to know, and they usually do. And so now the question is, how about genealogy? Does Google know anything about that? And the answer is maybe more than you think that they do. There are a number of subtopics that we're going to cover within the large world of Google. There are different Google applications, several of which will apply to genealogy. And because of that, there are a number of different Google databases, some of them that again will apply to genealogy. There is their straightforward search option where we search anything. And then there's an advanced search that will really stand as well when we talk about genealogy situations. So here are a number of different applications within Google, and we're going to talk about each one of those and how Google can help us with each of those things. Now, just to put it in context in the genealogy world, you know probably about Legacy Family Tree webinars. They're the biggest guy doing webinars. They have at latest count, I can't keep track of them all, but they have over 1,700 webinars. They group them into different categories, like DNA has about 200 and however many. But Google also, I clicked on that and counted them up. There's about 30 different classes, different webinars that they're giving on different aspects of Google, where different speakers will focus on a different app or something like that. Well, this evening we're going to do a more broad brush kind of look at Google. But you get the idea that I'm not the only guy who knows about Google in genealogy. Let's go right to Google. Google's my home page, and I'll bet it's the home page for a good number of us. It's that straightforward place. You go to google.com and there you are. Now, to put this in context again, what sites do you use most for genealogy? Now, I'll bet I list that first four, and you're probably with me on at least 2 or 3 of those, because those are the ones that get the most traffic. Ancestry, Family Search, the others. There are, second bullet, a number of government sites that we might look at. Different counties, different states where we look at marriages, taxes, probate. There are a variety of specialty sites that we might like to look at. And my message for this evening is to introduce you and get you convinced that Google is among them in a big way. So we're going to look at the front page of Google. And so for starters, right where that left-hand arrow is, that's where you're going to make a request. There are 2 or 3 other spots that are important on the Google home page. Right up there near the top, you see Gmail. Some of us may be involved with that. We're not going to talk about Gmail tonight, but we are going to talk about next to it the images, and those 9 little dots. It doesn't say it there unless you click on it, but that's where you find Google applications. Let's start with Google Images. We'll click on that. So we have just clicked on that, and now you see the home page has changed a little bit. And so where the downward arrow is, you see that it says Google Images there. And so I have put in the name of, it is my mother's first cousin. He's as close as I can come to anybody who was a prominent person in my family tree. And so I put in Jack Pettis, musician. He was big back in 100 years ago. And so we're in the world of Google Images. And so look at that. What a great response. I mean, there's a dozen or more pictures, images, and you see a picture of Jack's, the dance band group, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings. There's Jack himself looking very debonair. There's some sheet music that he is one of the composers of, and it goes on and does other things. Let's blow up that picture where he looks debonair, and you see that indeed he was living the high life. I mean, look at that hairdo and look at his manicure and all that. He was on top of the world way back then. Now, in addition to the pictures, there's some words that go with it that tell about Jack. And so here it tells that he was big back in the 1920s. And there's a variety of comments about what he did over the years. But now in terms of genealogy, let's look a little further. And here it gives data on his birth date, where it was, and how they even mention how some people got it wrong. And then they tell about his father, his mother, a sister. And so here, this is what you often get with these images. Here's the vital data for Jack and his family. I couldn't pass this one up because this is a picture of Jack. He doesn't look very happy, but there he is. He must be 2 or 3, maybe 2 years old. He's got more hair, more curls than his sister. And but anyway, it's a fun picture, I think. And there's Jack's gravestone, and there's some good relatives have made that nice picture there of the saxophone or whatever kind of phone it is. Jack's brother, the girl in the picture there, Molly, Jack's sister, his brother-in-law. Here I put in Billy Myers, that was his name, and it tells all about Billy Myers and what he did. There's a picture of Billy and sitting there at home in front of his piano, and there's Molly, who's now sitting next to another piano, and there's Billy again. Now this photo I took from my own collection because, as I said, they're sort of relatives of mine. And in fact, Molly made a comment on the back of that picture. She said, it's not a good picture of Billy, but you can see our new piano. And they had the smaller one in the other picture. They were musical people. I think on another photo, she said she really liked the white piano. She said nobody's sweetheart paid for that one. He was a composer back in the day. All right, still in the world of images, let's shift gears a little bit and we'll put in the word maps. Now, maps is down a little further as its own app, but we'll pick it off right here. We can get to it a couple of different ways. So this time we're going to look for maps, which is a special kind of image. And so here, this is just a sampling of the big world of maps that Google has, and most of them are free. Now this time I put in my own home county from Logan County, Illinois, which is one county up from Springfield, the capital. And you see that they've got over 200 maps for this small county. And it's probably every map that I ever would be interested in. But I can look at all of those different maps that go into detail for the different communities, the different townships, and where it's all located. In this, as genealogists get into the world of maps, sometimes we're interested in property ownership or where did people travel to or from. Well, Google has as many or more maps than anybody. And so you put in a couple of keywords and you get the maps. Here I have put in the words maps, early California, and I get some fun maps. Look at that top tier on the left, and you can see maps of when California used to be an island, at least on the map it was. All right, let's move a little further now to those 9 dots that should say these are the Google apps, because we might be inclined to miss them if we didn't click on that. So here we've clicked on them and we get the first tier. You know, here's about a dozen apps, but then where the lower arrow is, see, that says more. And so if you want to get more apps, that's where you go. But they're not making it very easy for us, because first of all, they didn't say in big letters, go here for the apps. And then they didn't say, hey, look at this, we've got more of them too. So we clicked on more, and again, we get about a dozen more. One of them there is books. And so that's the one that we're going to look at next. You know that a few years ago, Google was really big in the book scanner world. They embarked on this really major book scanning project, and they have now scanned something like 30 million books. They've slowed down a little bit. There were some lawsuits and things, but they've got them. They've got more books probably than anybody, including a good number of genealogy books. Well, let's try to find an example here. I have a great grandfather, Nicholas Baker, who lived way back when, and another ancestor that's way back much further on my mother's side. So we're going to look for those people, and then we'll also take a look and see if Jack made it into any of those books. So first of all, I have put in the words Logan County, Illinois, history. And notice that we're in Google Books now. And so this is where we are, and they've got them. And so we see several different books here that are histories of Logan County, and some of them, they give you more clues in their titles. One says about the third one down, the third arrow down says, here's one that has sketches of its people. And so we're going to read about some of those people. So again, I'm just scrolling down further, and here we're getting more information, more history books, and more especially about the early days of the county. So I want to now zero in on my ancestor, and so maybe we can speed up the process a little bit. And so this time we're going to put in Logan County and the name of my ancestor. So where the upper arrow is, I've put in Logan County, Illinois, early history, Nicholas Baker. And I got some good hits. And so you see on the left, I've made some smaller arrows that point to his name within certain history books. I've also found one down there that had the same name, but he was the wrong person. Sometimes we get that with people who have a common name. But now we know where he is in the book. And so now with a quick click, we can go and read about him right there in the book. Now, before we go further, I do want to pause and make a really important point. There is a great difference between finding data with the regular big, huge Google search engine versus these other Google, their subordinate kind of search engines, like the Google book engine is only going to contain a small portion of what big Google has. So now, third bullet, the Google book search engine filters out all the data not pertaining to books. So it gets different results than the big Google search engine. So now we're in the book thing now. And so this time, let's compare it. So if we had instead gone on the regular Google search engine and put in Logan County, same as we did before, look at that. We're not clicking the way we should. The results are different. And part of the problem is that they are different search engines. Like on the left, we're starting to get stuff that's not in the books. And so to get good book data, you've got to work with the Google book search engine, and that message, that rule will apply to all the other Google apps that we talk about. And so remember that point. That's really a vital point. And so whichever ones of these different Google apps we get into, once you get in there, you're really working with a smaller, more focused search engine. Now we're back to our story of the books. And so we looked for Nicholas Baker in that one book, and there he is. And it's telling about how he was a Catholic, and he and his brother went to church there with some other people in Lincoln way back when. And so here is the full story there that we can read if we want to, where the thing was referenced, and we can read that book online. And so here's just a sample of what we get there. Oh, this was the second book that was referenced. And again, we click on that, we go right to the page, and we read what they have to say about Nicholas Baker. Here's another book. This is a county directory that tells sort of basic information about all these different people. So here where the arrow is, it says here's Nicholas Baker, a farmer, section 17, post office box, Lincoln. He's a Democrat, he's a Catholic, and he came from Germany. Now notice that some of the people, there's even more information on the, like in the right-hand column. Apparently Patrick DeWitt must have spent more money in the directory, because he really gets a full treatment. Okay, this time for books, I put in Jack Pettis, and look at that. They know about a lot of books where he was referenced, and a lot of stories, anecdotes, and indeed, jazz musicians lead more interesting lives than the rest of us. Now we're back here to where we were working with these different apps, but notice, see where books was. We looked at that before in the upper right. Now I've put an arrow by where they say even more from Google. I think they ought to have that in much bigger print than that, so that you can find your way to those different apps. I gave this same presentation to a group a few months ago, and I said to the people, there were about 50 people in the room, and I said, how many of you have ever clicked on those 9 dots and found apps and worked with those apps? And I think it was like 3 people was all. I think a lot of people are missing that whole area. I think that Google should do a better job of advertising what's within those 9 dots, because we're going to find several really good things. But I think, as I've said here, that it's kind of buried way down there. Let's give it a click and see what we find. They have now moved us into another world of even more apps. And you scroll down and look at that. That must be another 50 or 60 apps that they have. They just keep adding more. I think all told, they must have 100 or more apps. And I've picked out a few that I recognize are really applicable to genealogy. One of them is Google Earth, where the top arrow is, Google Alerts, and down near the bottom, the Google Street View. I'll have an example for each one of those. Oh, and we're scrolling down even further. Now, we got to maps a different way, but you could go to the Google Maps place. And here's a Google Translate that gets a lot of press. And I guess we can use that sometimes in genealogy, as well as look at YouTube, which now belongs to Google. Some of those apps that are listed there, they had listed up above, but now here they are again. In doing genealogy, sometimes we have just some challenging ancestors that we're having really a hard time chasing them down. I have some of those, and one of them is Augustus Armbrust. I know when he's born because I've got a death record for him, and I kind of think I even maybe know the general area, but I can't find his birth record. Maybe somebody else, maybe something will happen. But I don't want to keep looking every few months. And so Google has this way where I can go to Google Alerts. That's what I'm going to click on right now. And you see here's Alerts. And I put in the name of this person, Augustus Armbrust. Now, maybe I could even have put more words like born 1767. But now, if anything gets posted about Augustus, Google will send me an alert. And so I don't have to keep checking and rechecking. And so I think that's really kind of a neat thing for those of us who have, maybe we have 10 or 12 different people that we're chasing after. There's more Google apps that we're going to look at now, Google Translate and the different kind of some relatives of Google Maps, and YouTube, which Google purchased a while back. Google continues to grow and change and even improve on what they have. And Google Translate is an example of that. It always has been user-friendly, and it's been probably, it does as good a job of translating as any of the other translating programs. But you access that right from the app, and you pick your language. Here I've chosen to look at some German people, German records. Now, not only will they give you information if you type in what's on the left-hand side and what you want on the right, but they've advanced. They're now set up so that you can just speak the words and you can get them back translating one language to another, and several other different options there with their translation program, several of which I think could be useful for our genealogists. So here's the example of the most simple-minded kind of arrangement, where you just type the German words on one side and you ask for the English on the other. There are different kinds of map programs. One of them is the Earth, the Street View. And Google's not the only game in town for that, but it does the job very well. And here's an example for one of my wife's people. This was a London person, the suburbs of London. And so where the arrows are on the right-hand side, he had lived back in the 1800s in Bermondsey. Or on the left, he also lived in, I know the British say it different, Southwark. They say that, I won't even try to say it. But you see that that's kind of located near the Tower of London. Because of the British census, I have an address for that man. He lived on East Street, and so I know where that's located. And so let's go to Google and see what it looks like today. And look at that. I think that's kind of interesting to be able to look right there, without even bothering to go to London, and you have a pretty good feel for where it was that he lived. I'm sure that they've updated the building somewhat since his time, but it looks like it's the same basic operation where you have your store on the ground floor and maybe you live upstairs. YouTube is, again, it's a Google acquisition, and much like Google, it's got anything and everything on it. And it is growing so fast, nobody could even possibly begin to view even a small portion of the items there. And among them, there are many genealogy presentations. So as usual, you click on the Google icon, and I've put some arrows down there where we get some different genealogy stories. You might, in fact, look at some things there and say, hey, there's some other stuff here that's kind of good too. There's the dentist on the Carol Burnett show, and a lot of good, fun things on this on the YouTube. But here we've found at least 3 different genealogy YouTube classes, programs. And so we want to do better than that. So within the world of YouTube, I have put in the words at the top where the arrow is, genealogy research. And now I'm only going to focus and get a list of all of their things that have to do with genealogy research. And they're all part of this world of the YouTube presentations. And you see that there's a good variety of topics here. I kind of scrolled down to see how many are listed. I know there's at least over 500, and you can get a smattering of a sampling here to see what you're kind of getting, different things, different classes, and they're free. And so that's a great advantage. But you can find really good things, and some of the names here that people, the people who have given those classes, some of those people have just done it out of the goodness of their heart, and I don't think they got paid anything, but they're good YouTube presentations. In the world of obituaries, this is not really, it's not an app, but because we go to Google to find these things, I've kind of put it in this same bucket as the others. And sometimes I'm on DNA research and I say, well, I know that I'm kind of related to that person, but I kind of lost track of my second cousin or whoever it was. And so maybe I need to look at the obituaries. And so like here is a second cousin of mine, and she comes from that Logan County, Illinois area. She's a bit older than I am, but there she is with all of her survivors, including all of her children, all of the names of the in-laws. And so this you really get the idea of how you can put people into their right family branches by looking at these obituaries. Similarly, Google helps with the old newspapers. You can just use a standard search option and put in a word much like we did for obituaries. You're looking for the name of the person, the time period, or maybe the location is what will swing it for you. So like here, they have this big list of the different online papers and different historical newspapers that are online. Now we're getting to one that I really like, and that is the Google search option. This is where you just say, I know that Google knows everything, and they're going to know something about my people. Second bullet here is a really important point. This is the most important point today. The difference between searching for a person on a standard genealogy site, like one of those great big search engines like Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage, compare that with searching on Google, the difference is significant because the data on those genealogy sites, it's got to be included in some genealogy collection. Somebody had to put it on Ancestry or Family Search. With Google, here's the thing, that data can come from anywhere. And third bullet, many people, many people post a lot of genealogy information. I think 10 times, 50 times as many people post genealogy information, but they don't post it on the genealogy sites. They've got their own site, or they just want to post it somewhere. Ancestry doesn't know about them. Family Search doesn't know about them, but Google knows about them because Google knows everything. Now, here's my example. Here's Gottelsheim. That's one of my German towns. I've done a pretty good job with the records that go back to 1646. That's almost 400 years ago. But earlier than that, it gets tighter and tougher, and the church records fade out. And so I'm just looking to see, is there anything else out there? Now, this is my great-grandfather, Carl Paulus, at the center of this, who came to America in the 1850s, and this is all his relatives. And so, see, this goes back a good ways, back to the 1600s. But I'm wondering, does anybody know anything more? So I'm going to go to Google and use it as a search engine. And so I'm going to use words like Gottelsheim plus genealogy, Gottelsheim plus Scriba, that's one of my families there. And so I use different combinations of key words. Sometimes you've got to sort through things that are not good hits, but I found two really good hits here. One was a reference to the Scriba Family Society. And this is an established organization. I think it's much like our own genealogy societies for our families, you know, where we get together and for a reunion, maybe we have a newsletter, something like that. And then this site also, this hit also told me about a Scriba family book, a surname book that was written really way back when. And so they're one of my Gottelsheim families. So I look at this, I'm going to check that Scriba Family Society. And so, whoops, I went the wrong way. So here is their family association for the Scriba family. And this was the hit that I used to find those people. And so I read about their website. It says that they're a well-established organization. They have reunions and newsletters, and they've been doing it for 200 years. Now, here is the punchline. They've built over the years a database of all of the Scribas from early Scribas right on up to the present. And so I'm a bona fide descendant. I joined the society. I'm getting their newsletters and all. And most important, I got their, it was on a CD. It was on a CD that I got their database of over 13,000 names. I can ask you, when did you ever get into a situation where 13,000 names just fell into your lap, and you can fatten up your family tree by having all of those names that are pretty well vetted and good sources for them. And, you know, here it was. Now, it happened that because the early scribas, some of them were pastors in the church, that some were civic leaders, they were able to trace those really early scribas much earlier than I had, back to that's over 500 years ago. And then bringing it up to the present time, I think it's like a microcosm of all Germany, where we get scribas that now their descendants live in Japan, India, everywhere in the world. And so the result of that was I contributed a few names of people who came to America. They didn't know about them, but I got much more. In addition to the 13,000 people, I got a few more direct people and collaterals. I mean, I really hit the jackpot with those people. And again, the real punchline is I never would have found that data without using Google, because Ancestry doesn't know about them. Neither do the other big fat genealogy search engines. Just to show you that this happens more than once, I'm giving you a second example. Another German town, another one of my families. I put in the magic words, I get a good hit. And here it takes me to a genealogist website. I've taken that screenshot right from his materials. And this is this guy who has done an enormous amount of work on his family that intermarried with my family. And it goes way back to the 1600s and earlier. And here's the kind of charts that this guy had developed. I mean, this was just dynamite stuff. And several of those family names that you read across the top 4 tiers, several of those are my people as well as his people. Again, my comment on the right side, many people post a lot of genealogy data, but they don't put it on the typical big genealogy sites. They've never heard of Ancestry or Family Search, but they're interested in genealogy. Look at the work that this kind of a guy did, but he loaded it up for his own site, and much like the scribas. And I could show you other examples as well. Google really works this way. Now, sometimes you can Google an individual ancestor. Maybe it's especially challenging ancestor, or maybe there's something special about the person, and just like we did with Jack Pettis. And so, like, here is my man Jonathan Tracy, who's born way back when in the 1700s. I put in his name where the upper arrow is, and then I say born 1742, because there might be other people with that same name. Indeed, there are other people with that same name. And this time I get about a dozen hits. There are things that people have posted about Jonathan Tracy. And so you can focus on one individual. Even better, Google has a thing called advanced search that I will wager that most of you have never used, but it is valuable. How do you find it? Where is it? You'll find it by scrolling down to the right-hand bottom of Google's opening page. There's a place there called Settings, and you're going to get some options. Look at the opening page. Did you ever even think about going to that lower right-hand corner where it says Settings? Well, if you do, and if you click on it, here are some different options, one of which is Advanced Search. We will click on Advanced Search, and it opens up this new world for you, because now Advanced Search has It's like follow the directions. They want you to be so specific in the exact words that you use. And so on the left, you'll see where you will put in, find pages with either all these words, this exact phrase, any of these words. And so pretty soon you do the right thing, you really pin it down. Now, we say, do you have any interesting ancestry? I don't know if I do or not. So I'm playing around with different ones. Third bullet, I'm Googling for a woman way back in New England. On my mother's side of the house, her name is Mary Lovett Taylor. And they know about her. See the upper left-hand arrow, Mary Tyler, an accused witch. Ah, now that entry caught my eye, and indeed, the New England witch trials, for where we've had dramatic plays and movies and things, they were real events. They caused big problems. This woman was hauled into jail and put on trial. Mary survived, and she lived to be 81. Now, I did that one with just, see up above, I was not yet in advanced search. This time we're going to do it with advanced search, because advanced search will get there faster. See, here I'm following their directions. Mary Tyler Witch on the top line. The exact phrase, I wanted to say Mary Tyler. None of these words, I don't want them to say Mary Tyler Moore, because I'll get, 300 hits and I won't want those. So this is how I'm going to get right where I want. So see where the upper arrow is. This is what I've put in, those exact words, and they go right to it. And they've got several entries, 5 or 6 I've shown here. The downward arrow suggests, yes, there's even a few other places to look and find good things about Mary Tyler, the accused witch. We have come almost to the end. We talked about what we wanted to, the images, these different apps. We had different examples of images, pictures, maps. We did the book story. We found people in those books. And each time we do, we get into a different subordinate type of a search engine. With Google Alerts, you can see the advantage of that. Google Translate is growing and is better than it ever has been. We had examples from the map Earth business. There's all those good webinars that you can see on YouTube. And maybe you find something useful in the obituary data. And the last 2 things we talked about were just a regular Google search, or even better, an advanced search. I think the advanced search would probably have done me well when I was looking for those things like the Scriba Society, but I didn't even know about advanced search then, because I'd never looked in that lower right-hand corner. So here we have come to the end. I'm going to push the button and stop sharing so we can all see one another and we'll talk.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Kind of face them. If anyone has questions, feel free to shout it out.
So how do we get to the newspapers? So we just type online newspapers, or how does that work?
Did you hear that question, Mr. Baker?
You'll have to repeat it.
Yeah, there was a question. How do you get to online newspapers? Do you just Google search the term newspapers? That was it, correct, Pat?
Yeah, that's right. You just, you might go first to online newspapers, And then, but I think that just a few key words, I think the advanced search is probably your best answer for getting there. Because you could put in a few words like, I want the name of the person and I'm interested in newspapers. And I think that could kind of focus your search a little bit.
Are there maps for foreign countries?
Did you hear that, Mr. Baker?
Oh, I think they're in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the question was, are there maps for foreign countries? Just as you were discussing looking up your home county, in your experience, have you looked for something outside of the US before?
Oh yeah, Google's international. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Thank you for such a wonderful
No.
presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll shout it from the front. We had someone present say, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. They really learned a lot. It was fantastic.
Well, and it's nice to visit with all of you. Glad to be there.
And I have to say, even as a library staff member, I learned a thing or two. So patrons everywhere are going to benefit from your presentation today.
Oh, and thanks for the library for all of their help.
Fabulous. All right, nothing else? All right, thank you again.
All right.